Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, it is finally happening. They are actually looking to ban congressmen as well as the president and vice president from trading stocks. Wow, that is a sentence I never thought I would say out loud. But it's the truth, and we're going to be talking about it right now. So, on July 30th, 2025, the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee approved the measure on an 8-7 vote, sending it to the Senate floor. Right, Senator Josh Hawley was the lone Republican, right, who voted yes, whereas every Democrat backed it after negotiating several changes, including a carve-out for the current president and vice president. All right, so wow. All right, so what does this actually cover here? What does this actually do for us? Well, all members of Congress, their spouses, and dependent children are going to be covered under this bill. And the committee added a substitute as well that also covers the president and vice president, but only after Trump and Vance end their term, right? So they'll be included next time around. But what is banned, right? Is it just all stocks in general? Is that any form of investing? What is it? So buying, selling, or owning individual stocks, options, or similar securities while in office are going to be banned. Mutual funds, broad-based ETFs, and U.S. Treasuries are going to remain allowed. At least that's under the current form. With that said, current office holders are going to have 180 days after enactment to sell or place assets in a qualified blind trust. And newly elected officials are going to have 180 days from being sworn into office. So with that said here, what is going to be the penalty for breaking this? Well, fines are going to equal to the greater of 1,000 or the value of the prohibited transaction, plus possible referral to the DOJ for willing violations, which is unchanged from the Stock Act framework. And in addition to that, too, a lot of these things are going to be placed into a qualified blind trust here. So in most cases, there is probably a little bit way to like hide a little bit, right? But it's going to be a little bit more difficult to do so. And the penalties could be pretty great, right? So obviously they're going to want to avoid trading these stocks directly because people will find out, especially that they're going to have some compliance certification on this, right, annually. Or I think it's an audit every 2 years, I think it was saying. So wow, ladies and gentlemen, looks like we might actually get this to pass. I think it's possible this time around, and I think it raises some interesting questions because is that democratic or is that not democratic? And does that trample on the rights of a sovereign citizen or does it not trample on the rights of a sovereign citizen? Right. So hear me out on this, right? So everybody knows that politicians are corrupt. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, you just use your eyes and if you're blind, well, you're just blind. I don't know. I can't lead you anywhere. I can't tell you the facts. I can't make you believe me. But what I can say is politicians are corrupt through and through. Right. But as a democratic society, we did elect those corrupt politicians. And the idea of democracy is that if you don't like those corrupt politicians, you are able to vote them out the next term. Right. So, I mean, like we got Nancy Pelosi, super, 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 super corrupt. Right. Everybody knows she's corrupt. She's the poster child of corruption. Right. Corruptness. I don't even think that's a word. Corruption. And, somehow she keeps getting elected over and over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, they got pictures of her with like JFK. I mean, like, and that's not even a joke. Like, you just look them up online. So it's crazy, right? But this idea, right, that you are going to therefore say, all right, well, these politicians can get in trouble for just, acting as a sovereign citizen, even though they were democratically elected to represent the people. So therefore, the people would want somebody like that in power, right? Somebody who's using their office to enrich themselves, right? So, I mean, it's a moral argument here, and like people probably don't really necessarily want that, but at the end of the day, right, people have used their votes for that person. So, you could say, well, in theory they don't want that, but in practice they did want it, right? So, and then you have to say, all right, well, what about the sovereignty of the individual, right? Can the individual who, like, if you're a public servant, your job is to serve the United States, right? But why should you have to trample your own individual liberties in order to serve the United States? Right? Why shouldn't you be allowed to trade stocks and try to enrich yourself and use the information that you have to the best of your ability to make those decisions to help make you become rich? Why should you have to give that up just by joining office? I mean, I can tell you this. I was looking at the Ohio General Assembly pay the other day, and it's only like $60K a year. It's like, well, no wonder everybody's corrupt, right? I mean, like Like, come on now. Do you want them to have a decent life or not? And do you want only the rich people to get into power or not? Because most people aren't going to be taking that job, especially because it's extremely unstable. The amount of money it takes to get there, the time, the commitment. I mean, it's not worth it, right? It's not worth it. And so, plus, you're probably going to have 2 residences because you're going to have to go down to Columbus, Ohio, and then you also have a home in the district with which you reside. So, like, look, I mean, come on, who we kidding here? Why should you have to make that sacrifice? Well, I don't think that you should have to make that sacrifice. But what I will say is that if we are going to make a sacrifice, then there needs to be some provisions, which I think it allows for, like the mutual funds and whatnot. Index funds currently are allowed, and I think that's fantastic, right? I think that is fantastic. So that way you still get the ability to invest in your future as somebody who's just a normal person who's not corrupt, who's not already ultra wealthy, and you still get to have a positive impact on your own life, right? You shouldn't have to sacrifice everything, just to pursue public office, right? To me, that doesn't really make much sense, and in fact, I think that's kind of immoral. But what I will say is if you are going to attack stocks, I think you should, again, sort of expand the Stock Act, right? So, insider trading is technically illegal, right? But I do think that we should maybe expand that to where any direct influence over, let's say, any direct influence that you have within maybe a certain time frame of, or maybe if you have certain holdings, I should say. Yeah, how about this? How about if you had like certain holdings? Maybe you have to recuse yourself from voting. So for example, right, if you're gonna be voting on big tech companies and you have a bunch of Google stock, maybe you're just not allowed to vote on it. And maybe that all has to be transparent. Or maybe you even had to declare stock transactions so far ahead of time, right? I mean, there's just a number of different things that we could do instead, but still allows the individual to sort of have that sovereignty, but it's a little bit more restricted rather than just banning them all together. And I understand, and like, look, it's a greater good type of thing, right? So like, if I were having to vote on this, right, like, yeah, I'd probably vote in favor of it. But what I am saying is that we should tread carefully on this, right? We should tread very, 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 very carefully on this because you are, again, trampling those rights for people who are just trying to serve the country. Well, again, most people are corrupt, right? But in theory, they're trying to serve the country. So it's an interesting conversation, and I think it's one that needs to be had. And I think it's one that we should be looking for alternatives on, as opposed to just immediately going to ban things. I think it's one of those arguments. It's like with the legalization of drugs, for example, right? It's like, look, guys, like, I'm not condoning them. It's like, but it's a sovereignty issue, right? Should you be allowed to, or should you not be allowed to, right? I mean, just, it's kind of like that. What about like greater good? I don't know. Should we just go outright ban things because, some bad things happen? I mean, like, look, alcohol, for example, right? It's like the only drug that we know that makes people more aggressive. And it's like, yeah, like, it's not good, right? I wouldn't condone it. You shouldn't do it. It's bad for your health. It's bad for the people around you. It's not good at all. And it's expensive. But should we ban it? I'm going to say no, because it's a sovereignty issue, And so, it's one of those things, right? That's coming from the libertarian front. I'm obviously a little bit more libertarian, but also very, very liberal as well. But it's one of these slippery slopes, I think, potentially. But at the end of the day, it's probably good policy, so I'd probably vote for it. So maybe that makes me a hypocrite. I don't know. But I do think that they should maybe consider alternatives instead. Which obviously it's impossible to get anything passed in this country because it's so bloody corrupt. And so maybe if you have to do what you have to do now, I get it. Maybe we can look at alternatives later on, for sure, no doubt. But the people really need to step up on this question, right? And like, you need to hold your politicians accountable because, look, if like, maybe banning them from trading stocks isn't necessarily the answer. Maybe, again, it's like you have to step away from your vote. Maybe you're not allowed to vote on certain topics. Maybe you have to declare votes. Maybe we actually prosecute people for insider trading. Like, how about that, right? Or how about we prosecute people who have bought or sold a bunch of stocks and then they go ahead and then they, vote in favor of the way that would make them the most money a couple days later. How about we actually prosecute those people? To me, that would make a little bit more sense. But I'm totally fine with index funds, and index funds actually is probably the smartest way to invest. And so, if you're corrupt, like, you're going to probably be more likely to buy individual stocks. If you don't know what you're doing, you're probably more likely to invest in individual stocks. If you're extremely likely to take risk, if you're a very risky person, then maybe you're probably more likely to buy individual stocks. And that's really the only crowd that buys them. Everybody else tends to buy index funds and mutual funds and just hold them for, a period of 40 years. And next thing you know, they're a millionaire because, most mutual fund managers can't beat the S&P 500, and like few of them can, right? But most can't. I saw Jordan Belfort, the actual Wolf of Wall Street. He was talking about this the other day, and it's very accurate, right? And people don't like this guy necessarily because obviously he scammed people and he went to prison for it or whatnot. But it's like, and I always see them be like, oh, he's not even a good salesman. It's like you just have no idea what you're talking about. Phenomenal salesman. But I will tell you this. He was saying the other day that the whole like mutual funds, in order to even justify their existence, they have to make short-term trades, right? Because otherwise, like if you're just holding the S&P 500, why am I paying you all this money to manage my funds in my portfolio? It's like, right? So think about it that way. And so obviously they're going to make short-term trades, and like, the farther you go out in time, like if it's maybe 10, I don't know what it is, but let's say it's 10 years, maybe it's like 75% of them can't outbeat the S&P 500. If you go out to like 20 years, it's like 85% of them can't outbeat the S&P 500. You go out to 30 years, 95% of them can't outbeat the S&P 500, right? You just can't do it. And so an index fund actually is a great way to invest, and it's a very safe way. And so I would personally say maybe they should be invested in the S&P 500. Totally allow them to do that, and I think that's fair. I think that's fair. If that provision wasn't in there, I would be against this bill. But the fact that it is in there, I am okay with that, as long as they're able to buy things like the S&P or you could have the Nasdaq, for example. Anything like that, I'm totally okay with. So yeah, this is a great bill, ladies and gentlemen. But again, I want to have the conversation and talk about these moral questions because it is a moral question here. Whether or not people like to admit it, whether or not they want to be very reactionary and say, "Oh, well, this sounds great." It's like, yeah, it does sound great, and like, yeah, I would support it. But what I am saying is, it's like we need to be careful. And we actually need to think these questions through, so that way in the future, maybe we can make a little bit more tailored policies once we drain the swamp per se. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm curious to see what you have to say here. It's an interesting topic and lots of room for discussion. So leave your comments down below. Hit that subscribe button and try to get us to 300 subscribers. And thank you so much for watching.